Hi, everyone. Welcome to my session on ethical and sustainable travel for world schoolers. As world schoolers, we know we're not just here to consume a destination and move on to the next one. We want more than that. We want to engage with the places we visit. We want to learn about the places that we go to, and we want to be transformed. But along with all the wonderful things that travel offers us comes a responsibility. It's the responsibility to recognize your role as a visitor and to ensure that future generations will get to experience the transformative power of travel as well. I'm Astrid Vinje. I'm a world schooling mom and creator of the travel website, The Wandering Daughter. For this session, I'm going to be talking about, let me share this with you. I'm going to be talking about ethical and sustainable travel for world schoolers. So I'm going to give you and your family some useful strategies for how to travel responsibly in the world. But first, let me tell you a story. So even though I'm American, I have roots in Indonesia. I was born there and I spent a large chunk of my childhood in Indonesia. I still have family living in Jakarta and elsewhere throughout Indonesia. As a kid, my family would often vacation in Bali. Or when I was a kid, my family would always vacation in Bali. For those of you who've been there, you know it's a gorgeous place to visit. It has beaches, it has rice paddies, gorgeous temples, lots of great restaurants, so many activities for kids. It's really the ideal vacation destination. So when it came time for me to be a parent, when I had kids of my own and I wanted to travel, I knew I wanted to take my kids to Bali too. So the first 2 times we came to Bali, we did the typical Bali vacation experience. We only had a few days there. So we stayed at a hotel in Kuta. We did beach time. We took day trips to temples and we went to the monkey forest and we went snorkeling. It was that typical vacation mentality of like dropping in somewhere, doing as many activities as you can, and then leaving. And then in 2019, our family had a chance to spend a few months in Bali. Well, it wasn't just Bali, but it was 6 months in Indonesia overall. So we spent time on the islands of Java, Lombok, Flores, and of course, Bali. So one of the magical things that happens when you stay longer in a destination is that you get to really see a different side of that place. And that's what happened to us. Spending an extended amount of time in Bali really gave us a chance to dive deeper into the culture. We saw the good sides and the bad. We learned about the Trihita Karana philosophy that serves as the basis of Balinese culture. The harmony we have among the spiritual world, the natural world, and with each other. But we also learned about the problems that Bali has too. Economic disparity between the locals and the tourists, which is made worse every year by Bali's popularity in travel. We learned about the plastic pollution that's not just caused by limited recycling infrastructure in Indonesia, but also because of the practice of wealthy European and North American countries outsourcing their recycling to poorer countries in Asia. We learned about the sexism that exists in Balinese culture, where women are the ones that have to make and carry the heavy offerings, and they aren't allowed to divorce their husbands for fear of being ostracized by society, even if it means staying in an abusive marriage. That time in Bali really gave us a more well-rounded view of the island, and it stuck with us. We still love visiting Bali, but we also see it more than just a glossy, shallow image. And that, I think, is the goal for all of us as world schoolers. So let me tell you a little bit about myself and my family. From 2018 to 2021, my family and I traveled full-time around the world as digital nomads. We visited around 13 countries in North America, Central America, Europe, and Asia. We did a lot of slow travel. We'd spend at least a month at a time in one city before moving on to the next. And then we'd spend multiple months in a country, visiting a couple cities in those places. I wrote a lot about the places we visited on my website, The Wandering Daughter. Then in 2022, we decided to return to the US so that we could be close to extended family. And even though we've put our full-time travels on pause, we still have travel in our lives. And we go back to Mexico often, multiple times. Last year, we visited Scotland for 5 weeks. And this past July and August, we spent 6 weeks in Japan and Indonesia. As a family, we really value the deep experiences that we gain from traveling and connecting with the people and places we come across. And that's really what I want to talk to you about today. So officially, this session is about responsible travel and how to travel ethically and sustainably in the world with your kids. But really, it's about making connections with the world. It's about how we can connect more deeply with the people and places we visit. Because if you think about it, connection leads to caring. And caring leads to a desire to make things better for the people and the places that we love. So if we connect to the places we visit, if we connect to it authentically in a real way, then we'll naturally want to care for those places too. All right, so let's do a thought exercise. Think about a travel memory where you made a real connection. Let's take a moment to go back to that experience and reflect. What was the connection that you made? Was it with a person, a place? Was it a particular experience? How did it make you feel? What impact did it make on you or your kids? Let's sit and feel that memory for a bit. Now think about what you did after you came home. After that transformative, meaningful travel experience, what did you do to prolong that connection? What did you do to pay that experience forward, to repay the impact that was made to you? Let me be honest for a bit. I think for most of us, we come back from our travels and then life just goes back to normal. That happens to me too. That euphoric feeling of connection you made during your travels, it gets lost. It gets set aside for school schedules, for work, for family obligations, for other things that require our attention on a daily basis. That's why it's important, so important to get into the practice of traveling beyond the surface level, to travel more deeply, to make those meaningful travel experiences more frequent so that it just becomes a part of who you are as a traveler. Meaningful travel experiences help us deepen our understanding of the cultures we encounter or the cultures that we visit. We learn about the traditions and the histories that shape those cultures. That type of travel helps us build empathy. Engaging meaningfully in a destination teaches our children that how to appreciate diverse perspectives and ways of life, teaches them to be open-minded. We learn how to be more thoughtful in our travels. It teaches our kids to appreciate places as more than just a photo opportunity and a bucket list item. We learn how to move away from that checklist mentality when it comes to travel. And finally, getting into the practice of traveling more meaningfully today has implications for future generations too. Creating a future of equity and understanding starts with us as parents. If we want the world to be better, we need to be good role models for our children, so they carry those values into their adulthood and pass them on to their kids. All right, so now I've given you the why. Now let's talk about the how. How do families travel more meaningfully and responsibly? How can they incorporate ethical and sustainable practices into their travels? So I've listed a few ways here. There's simple things that you can start doing today with your kids or for your next trip. It's really about shifting your mindset from mindless consumption to intentional experiences. So you want to be intentional about minimizing the impact of your travels. Be intentional about respecting the culture and communities you visit. Focus on education and awareness of the people and places you encounter. And understand the privileges that you carry or maybe don't carry as a traveler and the dynamics of that privilege as you go to different places in the world. Look at things with a deeper context. All right, let's do another exercise. This time, imagine that you're planning for your next trip. What's the first thing that you do? Likely, it's picking your destination. And then once you have that destination picked out, then you're booking your tickets and you're booking your lodging. And now you have those things set. Now you're planning the rest of your trip. You're going and researching the fun activities to do with your kids. You're looking up the go-to spots, the must-do activities at each destination. Maybe you don't have time for all that, so you outsource it to a tour group. Or maybe you do a Google search and find articles about the top 5 things you need to do in XYZ destination. Maybe you have a Pinterest board with like travel inspiration, or you start scrolling through Instagram to see what, shiny, catchy thing catches your eye. And you build your itinerary that way so that it maximizes your time there. And then when you're there, you focus on getting through your itinerary because you've already paid for all this stuff. You don't want to lose out on that. You don't want to waste your money. You're shopping for souvenirs to remember the place. You're eating at the restaurants that all the influencers are talking about on TikTok. Now take a step back and think about how you can incorporate intention into each step of the travel planning process and also in the trip. Where and how can you be more mindful in your travels? Let's see what an intentional approach to traveling responsibly might look like. First, even before you choose your destination, take some time to set intentions with your family. This can mean defining what responsible travel means for you and your kids. How might that show up in your family? What impact do you want to make as travelers? What kind of practices do you want to do to show your commitment to responsible travel? Take some time to come up with some shared values for your family. And then understanding your values will help determine where you want to go in the world and what activities you want to do in the world. And then once you've set that, then you can pick your destination, and then you can spend some time learning about it. Learn about the cultural norms, the environmental concerns, any historical contexts of that destination. You can watch videos, you can read books with your kids, you can watch movies about those places, listen to some music, learn some phrases. We as a family love using Duolingo to learn new languages, but we also like watching movies in a different language. If you like food, you can eat at restaurants in your local community that serve that type of cuisine. Now, you can still do your Google search of the top 5 things to do in X destination, but go deeper too. We like watching YouTube as a family, or we like using YouTube as a resource for our family. And some of the channels that we love for this type of research are Geography Now and Crash Course History. So Geography Now is a channel dedicated to providing an overview of all the UN countries. So he's gone through from A to Z every country in the UN. And then Crash Course History gives history videos about different places in the world. It's not always just going to be focusing on US history, but they cover world history as well. So you can find things that relate to the destinations that you're visiting. TED Ed is also a great YouTube channel that we love. It has some great videos about cultures and myths around the world, and we love the animation part of it. So now you've done your research and you can start booking your lodging and activities. And as you're doing that, and while you're on your trip, be conscious about how you're spending your money. Be mindful of the products and services that you buy. What's the environmental impact? Who is providing the product or who is providing the service? What kind of economies are you supporting? Who's benefiting from your purchase? For tour companies, how ethical are their practices? How much are they giving back to the local economy? Where is your dollar going and who is it supporting? This one might take a bit more effort and research because not all companies will post that information on their website. And sometimes you just have to weigh the costs and benefits of doing good versus convenience. Maybe, your family has mobility issues and you can't do like public transportation all the time. So you do have to hire a car. Or maybe like you have certain needs where you can't stay with a local family, but you do have to stay, you need to be able to have access to internet or computers all the time. So be mindful of the choice. Just the important thing is that you are making a conscious choice instead of just like mindlessly buying. Now, something to get used to as we're talking about mindset shift is to let go of FOMO, the fear of missing out. This is something that often affects travelers, and this idea that since it's the only time you'll ever be in that one place, you need to see everything and do everything. You don't want to miss out on the opportunity. You may never have it again. FOMO is what justifies trips where you visit 5 countries in 3 weeks. FOMO is what leads to Venice and Cinque Terre becoming overcrowded while other cities in Italy get overlooked. FOMO is what causes us to wait over an hour in line for overpriced pancakes because we saw a cool video about them on Instagram. I'm not saying that FOMO is bad, but it doesn't lend itself to being mindful and intentional about our travel choices. So we need to let that go. And by letting go of FOMO, you can allow yourself to savor the experience more, to spend more time doing one thing or staying in one place. So even if you can't actually slow travel, even if you only have 1 or 2 weeks of vacation, you can still adopt a slow travel mentality by choosing only one destination. And then after your trip, instead of going back to normal right away, spend some time reflecting with your family. What did you see in the world? What did you observe? What were the highlights? What were some challenges that we experienced? What experiences impacted you the most and why? All of these things take a little bit more effort, but it will give you so much more meaningful returns. And it's okay if you don't go deep right away. Responsible travel is a practice. It's something that you continually do and build on over time. So start small with your family and then work on growing it as time goes on. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about privilege and how that might show up for you and your family as you travel. So I've got 2 stories to share with you, both from our travels in Bali. The first one is kind of a combination of our 2019 experience and our most recent trip in Bali in August. So during our travels in Bali, we were able to stay in some pretty nice places. They have multiple rooms, they have air conditioning, Wi-Fi, sometimes a pool. They're not luxury by any means, but they're pretty comfortable. I mean, and a lot more affordable than the cost of lodging for us in the United States. So on average, during our travels in Bali, our average monthly cost for a modest 2-bedroom Airbnb would range from 1,600 to 2,500 Australian dollars. To To put it into context, though, the average monthly salary for a Balinese local worker, according to salaryexpert.com, is 1,700 Australian dollars a month. And just for your information, the minimum wage for Bali is 273 Australian dollars per month. So while we ourselves as a family weren't living in luxury, we were definitely benefiting from the privilege that our US dollar had over the local economy. And here's another story related to privilege, also from our travels in Bali. So I already told you that I spent my childhood in Indonesia, and I also have family there. Because of the time I spent in Indonesia and my familial connections, I would say that I'm pretty proficient in Indonesian. And plus, I also like to, when I travel, I like to speak in the local language and learn like local words and stuff. So one day, I was in Ahmed in a small electronics store or kiosk talking to, it's like a phone store. The guy behind the counter was helping me sort out a problem with my SIM card and trying to help me figure out why it wasn't working on my phone. And we were both speaking to each other in Indonesian. And in walks a white male European traveler. He comes up to the counter, throws some rupiah down on the ground, and starts demanding that the guy behind the counter top up his phone with more data. Didn't even check to see if there was a queue, didn't even acknowledge my existence or my presence. In this guy's eyes, I wasn't a customer. Because of the color of my skin, because I look Indonesian, I was just another local, hanging out and chatting with a guy at the phone store. These two stories are examples of privilege, but on opposite sides of the spectrum. On one side, I benefited from privilege. On the other side, I was at a disadvantage. Now, my story isn't unique. Every family has to navigate the different privileges that they carry as they travel in the world. Privilege is multifaceted. It can mean many different things and requires us to address them in different ways. As you're traveling, think about the different ways that privilege exists in the world and how it relates to you. This can mean how it relates to you and how it relates to others. This can mean differences in economic and social classes. This can be how different gender identities and sexualities are treated by others. This can mean the dynamics among racial, ethnic, or religious groups within a country. And it can also be differences in education and ability. Understanding how your privileges impact how you travel in the world is a big part of traveling responsibly. And so is understanding your privileges compared to locals or compared to other travelers. The important thing is that we're aware of privilege and we acknowledge them. And we also involve our kids in talking about that and having that conversation too. You might be thinking, oh, well, why? Kids are so young, especially if it's like a little kid, 5 or 6-year-old. They shouldn't be concerned about that. But there are plenty of age-appropriate ways to talk to kids about privilege, and starting them young gets them to think about that much easier so that when they're an adult, they can recognize it right away. If you're curious about reading more about privilege, you can find some articles on my website. So I have one more exercise to do with you all. I want you to close your eyes again and picture a travel moment that was challenging for you and your family. Where were you at? What was it that happened that made it challenging for you? What was the situation? What was the experience? Did it involve an interaction with someone? Think about how you felt or how your body felt. What kind of emotions were running through your head? Now think about what you did after. Did you discuss this with your kids? Did you have a conversation about it? Sometimes as parents, we try to shield our kids from the hard stuff, but it really does them a disservice. Kids learn best when they see behaviors modeled by their parents. So engaging our kids in these challenging situations, talking about hard topics with them, that's how we're teaching them how to handle those situations on their own when they become adults. When you travel, you're undoubtedly going to come across hard topics. Maybe it's poverty or economic disparity. Maybe you're staying at a luxury hotel, but right next door is a shanty town. Or maybe you're eating at this fancy restaurant and along comes a beggar asking for food or money. Maybe it's discrimination or racism. Maybe you witnessed racism during your travels, or maybe there was some kind of ethnic like racial or ethnic protest happening in the cities that you're visiting. Maybe you're visiting a country where a genocide happened or a big tragedy happened. Maybe you're witnessing environmental destruction or endangerment of certain species of animals. Whatever it is, don't shy away from talking about it. Have that conversation with your kids. Talk to them in age-appropriate ways without dumbing down the topic. If they ask questions and you're not sure how to answer it, be okay with admitting that you don't know the answer. Be okay with vulnerability. And use it as an opportunity to learn with them. You can also try asking them what they think about the topic, and then talk about how the reality might be different or the same as what they thought. Make this a regular thing instead of a one-time thing. Your brain is just like any other muscle in your body. It needs practice to build up strength. So practicing, talking about these hard topics helps your brain develop the muscle memory to make it easier next time. And finally, lean into the resources that you have available. Again, you don't have to have all the answers. You can find books, you can find videos, talk to people that you know that are well-versed in these topics. You just need to show your kids where to look for that information. So the final thing I want to leave you with is the idea of how to use your presence for good. As travelers, we make an impact on the destinations we visit, whether we intend to or not. But as responsible travelers, we want to make sure that the impact is a positive one rather than a negative one. So whenever you can, support local economies. Be mindful about poverty tourism. So it's okay to take tours that show, that go to places that are poor, that show economic disparity in a destination. But be critical about the tour. Be mindful that it's not exoticizing poverty or demeaning people in any way. Use your analysis, your analytical skills to look at it in that way. Respect boundaries, whether it's taking pictures or walking through neighborhoods or visiting communities. Remember, you are a visitor. You don't own this place. Ask first if you can take a picture, or be aware if there are barriers that people put up intentionally for privacy or distance, and don't cross those barriers. Respect them. Take some time to learn about cultural norms before you go to a destination. Don't just assume that things are the same as they are back home. Most likely they're not. And if you're planning on volunteering while you're traveling, do some research about the impact of that volunteer project. Is it really doing good or is it doing harm? Finally, the most important thing is to practice humility. Again, you're a visitor. Remember that. And know that you may not ever fully understand the context of a place. And that's okay. So I'm ending this talk with some resources that I want to share with you all. If you want to learn about responsible travel, take a look through my website, The Wandering Daughter. I have several articles about how to travel responsibly with your kids. I also have a Facebook group called Worldschoolers Traveling Sustainably that focuses on responsible travel. And we have conversations about different places or destinations in the world and like different ways that we can be sustainable and ethical in our travels. If you're curious to dive more into sustainability in general, you can take a look at the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. These are goals that the UN created in 2015 to provide a blueprint for peace and prosperity in the world. But you can also apply that into your own travels, to make sure that your travels have an impact that are based off of the UN goals. And finally, the Center for Responsible Travel has some great resources for learning about how to travel responsibly. They have tips and a guide for the do's and don'ts of travel giving. So I want to thank you all for listening to my session. If you have any questions, I invite you to please send them along to astrid@thewanderingdaughter.com. And, if you want to follow me on Instagram, I am @wanderdaughter. So I hope you gained some insight from this session and some strategies for how to travel more responsibly with your kids. And I hope that it's inspired you to be more mindful and intentional in your travels. So thank you all for your time, and I look forward to seeing you all out in the world. Thank you.